Okay, 9.6. Today we are only going to do 1 through 10, and then I'm going to save 11 and 12 for next class. So this is just taking 9.5 and taking it a step further by actually like solving 2. So instead of just adding and subtracting fractions, now we're going to solve them. And there's 2 different types of fractions that you'll see. We're going to encounter both of them. You will see ones where you have a fraction equal to a fraction. These are the ones that you like because the Lord blesses you and He gives you a fraction equal to a fraction, and all you have to do is cross multiply and solve. And that is like when life is golden, because it's not hard to do that. But when you have things being added or subtracted on either side, then you need to multiply the entire equation by the common denominator. And then always check for extraneous solutions you can't divide by 0. So we're going to start out with a couple where we have a fraction equal to a fraction. Number 1, I'm just going to put over 1 like this to make it a fraction equal to a fraction. So I'm going to cross multiply and solve. Now there's 2 ways you can cross multiply. You can go ahead and distribute it in your head and not write it as 2 steps. Or you can do -4 5y plus 3 equals 28 first and then distribute. It is really up to you. If you want to just go ahead and write it as -20y minus 12 equals 28, then you are just a step above the rest, and that is okay. Then you just solve for y. So y equals -2. What it means by extraneous solutions would be if I plug in -2 here, would that make my denominator 0? If it would, then you would say that it's extraneous, and then there would be no solution. But the only extraneous solution would be that y equals -5/3, and that's not the same as -2. So we are good. So all you're doing when you're checking for extraneous solutions is you're taking this number and you're plugging it back in to the denominator, and you're checking to see if the denominator equals 0. If it does, then you would say no solution. So try number 2. We okay with number 2? Okay, try 3 and 4. Okay, so for number 3, r equals 3, and then for h equals 0. Kind of disappointing to get h equals 0. Any questions about those 2? So when you have fraction equals fraction, cross multiply. And like I said, that means that the Lord has blessed you and life is easy. Number 5 and 6 is when things get a little bit trickier. Not that you can't handle it, because I know you can. But when you don't have just a fraction equals a fraction, you see a plus or minus somewhere in there. So here I have like +2, then these 2 fractions that are plus. So anytime you see a plus or minus on the left or right hand side of the equal sign, from there you are just going to treat it like you did the complex fraction. So things like 5 and 6, you're going to multiply by the least common denominator. So kind of like how on the complex fractions we creatively multiplied by 1. On number 5, I'm going to go ahead and put this 2 over 1, and I'm going to look at all denominators. So I've got x, 1, and x. And what is my least common denominator here? Just x. So I'm going to take each term and I'm going to multiply by x. For the first one, the x's cancel and I'm just left with 5. For the second one, nothing can cancel, so I need to keep the x, so 5 plus 2x. And for the last one, the x's cancel and I'm just left with 6. Then I solve, so 2x equals 1, x equals 1/2. Then I go back and check, make sure that my denominator does not equal 0. When I plug in 1/2, it does not, so I keep x equals 1/2. Number 6, what is my least common denominator? X plus 1. So I'm going to write that above every fraction. In the first fraction, all of it cancels, and I'm just left with what? 3. In the second one, what cancels? The x plus 1, so I'm left with 3x. Good, because I keep the x. Equals negative. And the last fraction, what cancels? X's. So I'm left with negative 1 x plus 1. And you don't have to put the 1 there. You can if you want to. Then I simplify. So I distribute this negative. I'll go ahead and solve for x. And you get x equals negative 1. Now, does that work? No, because when I take this and I plug it back in, I get negative 1 plus 1, which gives me 0. So my answer is no solution. So number 7, you see this denominator with x squared plus 3x minus 10. What do I need to do with that first? I need to factor it. And what does that get factored to? X plus 5, x minus 2. And so here are my denominators. My least common denominator would be what? X plus 5, x minus 2. So I'm going to write that on the top of each fraction. You don't have to do this. If you can do it all in your head, that is okay. The first fraction, what gets canceled? X minus 2. So I'm left with 2. X plus 5 equals. What gets canceled in the second fraction? X minus 2. So x plus 5. And what gets canceled in the last fraction? Everything. So plus 6. From here, I'm going to try to solve. So I'm going to distribute. Move everything over. And can I factor this to be and then I solve, So x equals -4 and x equals 1. Do I have any conflicts with any of them?
Okay, last make the denominator negative.
Yeah, the denominator can be negative. So with number 8, just cross multiply and then factor and solve. If I could not factor that, how would I solve? That's another way. The quadratic formula. Would I be that evil? I wouldn't be that evil on a non-calculator section. I might be that evil on a calculator section. But how would you solve for roots if you had your calculator? Without doing the quadratic formula, what's another thing you could do? You could graph it, and when you graph it, what are you looking for? Where they intersect the x-axis, right? And if I were so kind to allow decimals, which I would be, then you would just graph it and see where it intersects. But I would not make you do the quadratic formula without a calculator. Okay, let's look at the last two. Like I said, I'm going to do 11 and 12 next class. Word problems, our favorite.
What is our test?
Yes, so next class we review and then test. So I think Monday. Okay, looking at number 9. I'm going to go ahead and put this over 1. And what can I do here? I can't cross multiply because I have this -2, but I can take out a c. And I'm left with 3c minus 4. Now what is my least common denominator? And then 1. C, 3c minus 4. Then on the left fraction, 3c minus 4 cancels. And I'm left with what? C squared. What gets canceled on the next fraction? All of it. So 7c squared plus 8. And does anything get canceled on the last one? No, so I'm going to multiply this by -2. So -2c, 3c minus 4. So try solving this one for c. Okay, for number 10, the least common denominator, going to combine n plus 2 and 6. So I multiply each fraction by 6n plus 2. The n plus 2's get canceled on the first two fractions. So I'm left with the 6 and the 5, which become 30. Minus then 6 and n plus 6. So I just went ahead and multiplied and did 6n plus 36. And then the 6's cancel on the last one. So I'm combining -5 and n plus 2. From there you distribute and get n equals 4. So homework is 9.6. Just do 1 through 10. On number 9, though, I do want you to change one thing. So let me erase everything. On number 9, since I don't want you to have to do the quadratic formula, so number 9, change the 5 on the numerator to be negative 16. So change the 5 to be negative 16.